Bertrand, who will pronounce his last name. So I'm very tired. And he will talk to us about asynchronous decision making in open source projects. Thank you very much.
At work, I've been starting to tell people to call me Bertrand Z, because my last name is directly that. So I'm from the French-speaking part of Switzerland. I work for Adobe in Basel, Switzerland, and I'm also on the board of directors of the Apache Software Foundation. So I have these two hats. This is local here. So Apache is where we do great open source stuff, and that's where I learned to do that community stuff. You know, I've been in Apache for many years now, 17 maybe, and involved in lots of community stuff, incubator, board directors, several projects, and then trying to bring some of that wisdom into the company. Adobe is like 15,000 people. For me, it's a really big thing. And as you probably know, the corporate world is often not as efficient as the in terms of project management and how you collaborate. So that's what we're going to discuss now. Synchronous decision making, as in making decisions without interrupting people, which is something that we do very well in lots of open source projects. This is based on three previous things that I did. This was a kind of a provocative one. I will not attend your meeting. I'm an open source person. I did that at ApacheCon a few years ago. And what I'm speaking about today is kind of the more politically correct version of it. Saying I will not attend your meeting because we could do that synchronously. And I have two articles on the web about that. One of opensource.com, which is the most recent. So you can read about that later if you're interested. The fun thing with this queuing thing here at FOSDEM is that we're not sure if the people on this side of the room who just arrived, if they're really here for this talk, or they kind of queue for the next talk. I'll be extra careful to try to convince you guys in case you're in this situation. So this is the gist of it. Open source is about remote software teams. You can, if you're working in large open source projects all over the place, people from different time zones, different cultures, different mother tongues. They have no boss. In lots of projects like Apache is very egalitarian. We don't want bosses in our projects. There are other models which work for other sorts of projects, but that's the Apache way. And actually they make lots of decisions. If you look at software, software is built with decisions. What tool to use, how do I structure this module, who's going to work on that. We're making constant decisions all the time. And it happens in open source projects without meetings. Most of our projects never have a meeting, or if we have a meeting, it's for socializing and for having drinks. But for work, for doing the actual work, we very seldom have meetings. And if we can keep the process efficient and fun, that's much better. We know that you do your best work when you're having fun. The process, even if it's in a big company, should be fun if you want people to stay around and do a good job. We often call that in circles where I'm active, shared neurons. Putting people's neurons together in the most efficient way to do something. So what do I mean exactly by synchronous decision making? I'm not the psychologist or anything, so I hope I'm not saying too stupid things, but that's from a pragmatic point of view. How do you get to a decision, especially in a group? So first you need to brainstorm. You need to evaluate what could we do. It's good to be crazy at this time. Don't be limited by reality or by economics or whatever. Have crazy ideas. And then you need to kind of relate that to the reality. What's actually possible or remotely possible. So this is the second phase when you define your options. Okay, we have all these crazy ideas, and concretely we have these 4 or 5. If you can reduce to maximum 6, 7 options, that's good. I like to have 3, 4 if that's possible. And then you need to build consensus on these options. If you're in a group, you have different options. You need to, get a common understanding and what's possible and what are we going to. What are the actually valid options on which we need to decide? Then the last step is none of this in the abstract requires you to be present in the same room or in the same channel or on the phone. Unless formal requirement that the decision needs to be made by voting in person. We have that in Switzerland. Voting in some Swiss canton people still vote by hand on the village square. That's kind of an old thing, but still. But some formal organizations require you to be, do synchronous voting. But in software development, it's not the case. There's no specific reason to do that. And I think you really need only two families of tools to do that. I'm not going to talk about specific tools. It's kind of, the tools rows. And I see two tools that you need to do that. One is the shared asynchronous communications channel, where you can talk to, kind of broadcast ideas. And then you need to go to a more structured place where you discuss a specific idea or a specific decision or a specific brainstorming and so on. And this is what I call just a case management tool. You can very much do that with this is a marine radio, where you can, if you call on channel 16, everybody hears you, and then you can switch to different channels to have a more specific discussion. It's similar to mailing list, the way it works, or Slack, you many channels and whatever you want, but you could very much do that with radio, and then you could very much use a case management tool with index cards using small drawers. It would work, and sometimes it's a good way if you're in a room together. Like if we needed to make decisions with this big group today, we could have whiteboards for the communications and then smaller whiteboards for the case management for the details. So this doesn't necessarily require software. Of course, when you use software, it's more convenient. But what I'm getting at is the principles. Exactly which tools you use doesn't matter. And again, the meetings are not really required. Doing it asynchronously gives you more time to think. And if English is not your primary language and you're working in English, it's good to have time to think. And maybe you need a bit more time to understand what the other people are saying. And it's much easier in writing than when someone is speaking at a fixed rhythm or very fast or whatever. So there are many advantages in working asynchronously, besides just not interrupting people, which is the most important thing. So why do I think we need to do that? My father was a carpenter, and he had a workshop, and we had a flat, the apartment on top of the workshop. Sometimes he was late for lunch because he was gluing things. You're gluing a chair, and you're starting to glue it, you cannot interrupt. If you interrupt, it's ruined. Your chair will not work. So, Daddy was coming a bit later for lunch because he was gluing things. And when you're working on a maker schedule, it's really, we know today that in software, if you're a software developer, you get in the zone, and if you interrupt it, it's over. You need maybe 2 hours to go back to what you're doing. And this is what Paul Graham, I have a link here to the blog post by Paul Graham, calls that maker schedule and manager schedule. On a maker schedule, the interruptions are very expensive. On a manager schedule, if your schedule, weekly schedule is made of 1 hour slots, if you are one more meeting, it's 1 more slot. It's not much. If you're a developer, the 1 hour meeting in the middle of the afternoon will very likely break your afternoon. Just being able to do deep work, the kind of deep work that you need. So this is very important. So meetings are very expensive. If people had to put coins in a machine when they do a meeting, otherwise the meeting would stop, they would realize how expensive a meeting actually is. And you shouldn't take them lightly. It's great if you can have meetings, but you have to realize they cost. And we also always joke about, if you go on YouTube, you'll find tons of videos about the failed meetings. I think the worst ones are the phone conferences with 18 people where you cannot talk, and it doesn't work. We know that. So we should do better. And the open source world does better, so we probably learn from it. So let's get into how you do that. So I'm saying you just need these two kind of abstract tools, the shared communications channel and the case management tool, and then how do you use them for different phases of the decision. The brainstorming will happen on the shared communications channel. It's messy, the discussions are maybe not well organized, if it's a mailing list or Slack channel or whatever, or marine radio. It's not extremely efficient in terms of being structured, but you can at least exchange ideas. Then at some point, when you go to the options phase, you might need to move to the case management tool already to have a more structured discussion. This is a discussion about the options of the decision that we're working towards. In software, you can very much do that in a issue tracker system. You could use, any one like Jira or Mozilla or whatever to do that. And in my groups, we tend to do that. We tend to use or get issues, whatever, already at the options phase. You create the ticket just to discuss the options. It gives you a better, better place. It has a URL. You can bring people to it easily. It's much more efficient than an email track. So part of the trick is learning to juggle these tools and switch, between the various tools at the right time. Then when you get to the consensus, we talk more about how the consensus works. Consensus is already starting to be in a smaller scope, maybe more structured. So I would probably do most of the consensus building in the case management. But if it's easy, maybe you do it on the ABS or on the channel that you do. And then the decision, I think it's really good to do the decision in the case management tool. So if you're working with tickets, you have one ticket for the decision. This is the decision that we made, and you have links to the various arguments or the prototypes that led you to that. And then people can go back to this decision later and understand it. You don't have to re-explain. If you give them the URL, people will ask, hey, why did you do it like that? I gave you the URL, go look. Maybe then later you come with more questions, but at least you have all the basics. So I'm a big fan of doing everything in the tracker in terms of making decisions. But there are different styles. We'll see that in the examples. Interestingly, on the left is the Swiss government. Switzerland is governed by 7 people, the Federal Council. And they have to agree, which is already making lots of decisions. They have a meeting every week, in-person meeting, which lasts maybe 3 hours, and they take 80 decisions every week about. So that's a lot in 3 hours. On the right, I'm talking about Apache. So I'm on the Apache board of directors. We have a monthly phone meeting which lasts about 2 hours, and we take also about 80 decisions, 2 hours. Why? It's not because we're geniuses. It's because most of the meeting is prepared in advance. Most of these decisions are actually done in advance using these asynchronous decision-making techniques. And then at the meeting, we might just ratify the discussion. The Swiss government works, I'll show that later. Here is just about building consensus, and the Swiss Federal Council says, we decide by consensus if we can, and if we can't, we do a vote. So what's important is having the consensus. If it's obvious, you don't need to vote. Sometimes when people join Apache projects and start voting for everything, you don't need to do that. If you have consensus, it's fine. And then if you have difficulty getting consensus, then a vote might be useful, and it's fair. It has, deterministic rules, so, okay, maybe you didn't win, but it was done because of the rule. So interestingly, these two bodies work pretty similarly for doing it. Let me give you a few practical examples of how this can work, and you see that the exact tools vary, but the principles are the same. This is something from the Apache Cordova project. Cordova is a toolkit for building mobile applications. It doesn't matter if you're just looking at how they collaborate. They have this Cordova Discuss, which is just a GitHub repository, and they use it to discuss new things that they might do, new features that they might add to their software. So making decisions about doing this feature or not. And they have defined a very simple process. They start with the ticket. If you think, I would do 3D, 3D audio on Cordova, you create a ticket saying, I would like to do that. You explain how it works, and you have discussion. This ticket, and if people agree, if there's consensus about going to the next step, then you create a file that describes your project, and this gets refined in the options and decision-making process. So we start with tickets, and they continue with the file. That's edited collaboratively. This is Apache Spin, the project where I'm currently active in the Apache Software Foundation, and we do kind of the opposite. We start, if we want to do something, we start by discussing it on a mailing list, so an unstructured, often messy, somewhat messy discussion. And then when it gets to a more complete stage, we move to the tracker and we do, in this case it's Jira, we do a Jira ticket where we discuss the details. So again, various tools, but always the same concept of a kind of broadcast or semi-broadcast communications channel, and then a more structured case management where you you do the details and define the decision making. And this is going back to my examples of the Swiss government and the Apache Board of Directors. And again, we see two quite different tools. So I'm not part of the Swiss government yet. But I actually wrote software that they used to do the agenda for the meeting. So I know, but it is coding information for that. This was done in the time when it was exotic to do software in Java. It was a long time ago. So the way we do it in the Apache Board of Directors, the case management tool that we use is extremely simple. It's one text file for me. We have one text file which is structured, with a simple structure that we have defined. And here you see, for example, the discussion of approving the report, the decision of approving the report of the designated project. And you have a small discussion in comments.
So it's standard
we have the discussion of approving the report of the project, and it's just some structured text in the text file, which is managing its subversion for historical reasons in a source code management system. Everybody can edit, you don't step on each other's toes. We have now tooling that works for that, so Whimsy makes it much nicer. But at the core, it's just that. So very simple tool, just a text file with some conventions in source code management. The Swiss government does it in a different way. They have paper lists for the meeting, which are color-coded. So I'm not sure about exactly what color means what, but for example, the orange list has uncontested items. So the items on which they agree. They know before the meeting that they're going to agree to all of them. So in the meeting, the chairman just says, guys, no, maybe he doesn't say, guys, their excellencies, I don't know how they call it. And then he says, are you okay to approve items 1 to 10? Very quickly done. So maybe after 15 minutes, they have already made 50 formal decisions, because those were done in advance using the asynchronous decision making. And then they have a blue list where they think, oh, there might be some discussion. So we cannot just take the items like that. We need to open small discussions when we're confident we will get to them in the meeting. So another 20, 30 discussions are made quickly. And then you get to the final, maybe 3, where there's going to be 5. So then you have some space left in the meeting for that. So it's a very efficient organization, built on very simple tools, color-coded paper lists, and it works for them, for government, so very easy people, and very efficient in terms of making these decisions. So I think this really shows that this works. It's really, I think, how open source projects operate and are successful, by making all these decisions in a way that's traceable, documented, fair, and without interrupting people, which is very important if you're working on maker schedule, so as software developers. So again, I think it's important to avoid focusing too much on the tools. As geeks, we quickly started on the discussions about tools and which one you like or not. I don't think it really matters here, but kind of going back to the basics of what in the abstract, what are the roles, what are the exact functions of these tools that we need. So I think the open source projects demonstrate, or living demonstration, that is really good. I have some more reading links on the slide, so you can have a look. It's just links in a pinboarding service, or to more articles or videos. So my takeaway would be that I think this works not only, so if you work in an open source project, it's important to be aware of these things and try to steer the team to really work like that. But it can also work in other circles, like in a company, from a big company or small one, doesn't matter. And for other topics, the Swiss government doesn't use software directly, and they use the exact same techniques. So I think it's very interesting to know this. Thank you. We have
We have 5 minutes for questions. Really quickly, someone make sure to swap out the battery on your questions for you.
Yes.
Okay, actually, please take
Yes.
Yes. How do you manage people that don't use the tools that go a different way,
Right.
that don't read their emails or...
Yeah. You have to find we know that forcing people usually doesn't work. So you have to find incentives for the people to use the tools in the right way. And I think the good incentive is making an example by using them yourself and having good results. I think that's a great way of doing that. Then you might have the problem of people being shy or being afraid of large mailing lists, things like that. So it's I would say it's a constant challenge. But for me, the best way is to make good examples and expose them. Have an internal blog post or whatever, or public one. There's no much question. Yes?
So, in the fashion director's call that consensus review a vote,
Yes, that's the same mechanism in projects or in board of directors.
okay, so, cool. So, I work with a worker cooperative, and we make all our decisions by consensus. So we avoid this vote position where potentially someone is disempowered in the process.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, have you faced that situation where you went to a vote, and you wish you could have achieved consensus?
Right. So do you mean consensus? So consensus is not equal to unanimity. Do we agree on that?
Yeah.
Consensus is widespread agreement. Yes. Yeah. So you would find my name in the board minutes by the one who has abstained on some decisions or voted no, and it can be a bit embarrassing. So you have to be, you have to accept that your idea might be the minority. So I would say that if you can reach consensus, it's much better. Sometimes it's obvious, so that's cool. Sometimes it's kind of natural consensus where people say, okay, I don't really agree, but I see you guys all agree, so okay, let it be. And then the vote might be either an indication that you have a potential fight, which is not necessarily a bad sign. People have different opinions, and it doesn't mean the minority is bad. But I agree that it can be a bit of a sensitive topic, so you have to be sensitive about it. And we, in the Apache community work, we do a lot of work to really encourage people to try to build consensus naturally, so you don't have to go into, especially into fighting, which is terrible. But at least the benefit of the vote is that you're not stuck. The vote allows you to unstuck for the good of the project. You make a decision and you go on. And maybe there are some flaws because people didn't like what happened, but at least the project is not blocked, which is amazing. Yes?
What if you have a vote that's 49 to 51?
We have that very often in Switzerland. That's not good. We hate those. And in Apache communities or in the community work in general, I would say that's a sign that something was not right. Either the question was bad or the topic is one that's not enough worked on. That's really bad.